It was the perfect opportunity for revenge when that HOA Karen hosted a wedding on my ranch without permission. So, I decided to introduce her fancy guest to my 2,000-pound bull Brutus. Nothing teaches trespassers a lesson quite like being trapped by an angry bull. It all started on a Saturday morning when I heard vehicles coming up my private road. Lots of them. The dust cloud was visible from my kitchen window. Hey folks, before I continue this crazy story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Which country or state are you in? Also, don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy these real-life revenge stories. My family's owned this ranch for 3 generations. 200 acres of prime Texas hill country that my grandfather purchased back in 1932. Rolling pastures, oak trees, a natural spring that feeds into a small lake. It's paradise to me even with all the hard work ranching requires. About 5 years ago, a fancy housing development started going up across the county road. Oakwood Estates, they called it. All identical houses with tiny yards and an aggressive HOA that sent me complaint letters about my fence line every month, even though my property wasn't part of their jurisdiction. The ringleader was a woman named Deborah Hartman, HOA president and self-appointed neighborhood queen. She drove a white Range Rover, wore pearls while getting her mail, and looked at my cattle like they were roaches whenever she passed by. The locals just called her HOA Karen behind her back. Our first run-in happened when she tried to fine me for my bull Brutus loitering by the fence line and creating an eyesore. I still have that letter framed in my office as a reminder of city folks' logic. "Ma'am," I told her when she came to my door, "bulls don't loiter. They graze. That's what they do." She just sniffed and said, "Well, our bylaws clearly state that no unsightly animal should be visible from the development entrance. It affects property values." "Your bylaws don't apply to my ranch," I reminded her. "And Brutus isn't unsightly. He's a prize-winning Brahma bull worth more than that vehicle you're driving." That was the start of a long, uncomfortable relationship between me, Deborah, and the Oakwood Estates HOA. They'd complain about my tractor noise, my rooster crowing, even the occasional smell of manure when the wind blew their way. I'd remind them that ranching was here long before their subdivision, and they'd threaten to call county officials about imaginary violations. I mostly ignored them and went about my business. Until last spring when things took an interesting turn. March in Texas means wildflower season. Bluebonnets carpet the hills, and my lower pasture near the lake turns into a sea of color. It's the one time of year I don't let the cattle graze that section, just to preserve the natural beauty. I was fixing a broken fence post near that pasture when I noticed Deborah standing at the property line with a younger woman who looked just like her, same blonde hair, same permanent frown. They were pointing at my lakeside area and taking pictures. Curious, I walked over. As I got closer, I could hear their conversation. "It's perfect, Mom," the younger woman was saying. "The lake backdrop, the wildflowers, the sunset view. Sarah's getting married at the country club, but this would make Chelsea's wedding so much more unique." Deborah spotted me approaching and straightened her designer jacket. "Mr. Callahan, good afternoon." "Afternoon, ladies." "Admiring the bluebonnets?" "Actually," Deborah gestured to the younger woman, "this is my daughter Madison. She's helping her friend plan a wedding, and we were just discussing how picturesque your lakefront is." Madison smiled with practiced charm. "It really is beautiful. Have you ever considered renting it out for events?" I chuckled. "Can't say that I have. This is a working ranch, not an event venue." "But that section isn't being used for cattle right now," Deborah pointed out. "And I'm sure a little extra income wouldn't hurt a struggling operation like yours." The condescending tone wasn't lost on me. She'd been spreading rumors about my ranch being in financial trouble ever since I turned down a lowball offer from a developer friend of hers last year. "The ranch is doing just fine, thank you. And that field needs rest for proper land management." Madison looked disappointed, but Deborah just gave that tight smile of hers. "Well, if you change your mind, do let us know. I'm sure we could work out a very reasonable arrangement." They left shortly after, but something about that interaction felt off. I should have paid more attention to the calculating look in Deborah's eyes. 3 weeks later, I was in my barn tuning up my tractor when my ranch hand Miguel rushed in, looking concerned. "Jeef, you better come see this," he said, wiping grease from his hands. "There are trucks coming up the south road. Lots of them." I followed him outside and squinted at the dust cloud rising from my private road. At least a dozen vehicles were making their way toward the lake pasture, rental trucks, vans with catering logos, and a line of expensive SUVs. "What the hell?" I muttered, grabbing my hat and truck keys. By the time we reached the lake, an entire wedding setup was already underway. Workers were setting up a white canopy, rows of chairs, and an arch right in the middle of my bluebonnet field. Florists were arranging bouquets, caterers were unloading equipment, and a photographer was scouting angles by my lake. I parked my truck and stepped out, too stunned to even yell at first. That's when I spotted Deborah directing operations like a general, clipboard in hand, pointing workers to different areas of my property. "Ms. Hartman," I called out, striding toward her. "What exactly do you think you're doing on my land?" She turned, not even a flicker of surprise on her face. "Oh, Mr. Callahan. I thought you'd be in town today." Clearly, that doesn't answer my question. Deborah glanced at her clipboard as if my outrage was a minor inconvenience. "We're setting up for Madison's friend Chelsea's wedding. The ceremony starts at 4. On my property? Without my permission." She had the audacity to look annoyed. "We left messages with your ranch hand last week about the rental arrangement. Everything's been arranged." I looked at Miguel, who shook his head firmly. "No one called or came by, Chief." "Nothing. There must have been a miscommunication," Deborah said smoothly. "But since we're already setting up, surely we can come to an agreement now. We're prepared to pay a small fee for the inconvenience." She reached into her designer purse and pulled out a check, already filled out for $500. The amount was insulting for a full wedding venue, let alone for the sheer gall of setting up without permission. "This isn't a miscommunication, Ms. Hartman. This is trespassing. You need to pack up and leave. Now." Her smile vanished. "That's not possible. The bride is already getting ready, guests are on their way, and we've invested thousands in this setup. Not my problem. This is private property. Be reasonable," she lowered her voice. "Do you really want to ruin a young woman's wedding day? How would that make you look to the community?" I noticed several workers had stopped to watch our confrontation. Deborah knew exactly what she was doing, putting me in a position where I'd look like the villain if I kicked out a wedding party. "You planned this deliberately," I said, realization dawning. "You knew I'd be put on the spot." She didn't deny it, just gave me a cold smile. "The check is fair. Take it, go back to your house for a few hours and we'll be out of your hair by nightfall. Or make a scene and be the talk of the county for ruining Chelsea's special day. Your choice." I'd like to say I stood my ground, ordered everyone off my property, and had the sheriff escort them away. That would have been my right. But Deborah had calculated correctly. I wasn't willing to be the man who destroyed a bride's wedding day, even if her future mother-in-law was a manipulative schemer. "The check doesn't cover it," I said finally. "If you're using my property, you'll pay a proper venue fee. $5,000. Deborah's eyes widened. "That's extortion." "No, that's the going rate. Check with any wedding venue in the county. Actually, they'd charge more for a lakeside setting with natural wildflowers." I crossed my arms. $5,000 and you keep the entire event within the boundaries of this field. No one goes near my barn, my cattle, or my house. And you're out by sunset with every piece of trash removed." After some theatrical sputtering and a phone call to someone I assumed was helping fund this wedding, Deborah agreed. She wrote a new check with barely concealed rage, practically tearing the paper as she signed it. "Pleasure doing business with you," I said, tipping my hat as I pocketed the check. "Miguel will stick around to make sure everything goes according to our agreement." As I drove back to the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd somehow still fallen into Deborah's trap. She'd gotten what she wanted, a picture-perfect wedding venue for a fraction of what it would normally cost, even with my increased fee. And she'd established a precedent that my property could be used for HOA-related functions. What I didn't know then was that Brutus, my 2,100-pound prize Brahma bull, was about to turn this wedding into the most memorable event in county history, just not in the way Deborah had planned. The wedding ceremony went off without a hitch, from what Miguel reported back. I stayed in my house, not wanting to spoil the event despite how it had been arranged. Around 5:30, the reception was in full swing. Music drifted across my property along with laughter and clinking glasses. I was in my office reviewing cattle vaccination records when Miguel called my cell phone, his voice tense. "Chief, we have a problem. A big problem." "What's happened?" "Some of the guests got drunk and decided to explore. They opened the gate to the north pasture." I felt my stomach drop. "Where Brutus is?" "See. I tried to stop them but they wouldn't listen. Said the party police couldn't tell them what to do on public property." "It's not public property." I grabbed my hat and keys. "Where are they now?" "Running back to the wedding. Fast." Miguel actually chuckled despite the situation. Brutus didn't like them taking selfies with him. I was halfway to my truck when Miguel added, And Jeef? Brutus is following them. He's headed for the reception. By the time I reached the lake field, chaos had already erupted. Men in suits and women in formal dresses were scrambling in every direction. Tables had been overturned, food scattered across the ground. And there, standing proudly in the middle of what had been a dance floor, was Brutus, his massive horns gleaming in the late afternoon sun. For those who've never seen a Brahma bull up close, imagine a wall of muscle with horns, weighing as much as a small car. Brutus was particularly impressive, gray with a distinctive hump, standing nearly 6 feet tall at the shoulder. He wasn't aggressive by nature, but he was territorial and easily annoyed by strangers. Right now, he seemed to be enjoying the disruption he'd caused, occasionally pawing at the ground when someone came too close, sending them scrambling away again. I spotted Deborah frantically trying to direct guests toward the exit road, her designer outfit now smudged with dirt and what looked like cake frosting. The bride was crying under the remains of the canopy, her white dress stained green from diving into the grass. The groom and his friends were huddled behind a catering truck, looking simultaneously terrified and furious. As I approached, Brutus noticed me and snorted in recognition but didn't move from his spot, directly between the wedding party and the only road leading out of my property. "Mr. Callahan." Deborah shrieked when she saw me. "Control your animal immediately. He's destroyed everything." I surveyed the damage calmly. "Looks to me like your guests entered his pasture without permission. Brutus was just defending his territory. This is outrageous. We'll sue you for every penny you have." I shook my head. "You might want to reconsider that approach, Ms. Hartman. You're trespassing on my property, remember? You signed a contract limiting your event to this field only. Your guests broke into a clearly marked livestock enclosure, harassed my bull and left the gate open. If anyone should be suing, it's me." Her face went from red to purple. "Just get that monster out of the way so we can leave." I looked over at Brutus, who seemed perfectly content with his new role as wedding bouncer. He'd found the wedding cake and was happily licking at the remains. "I'll move him when I'm ready," I said. "But first, we need to discuss the additional damages and trespassing issues." What followed was a 2-hour standoff that I'm sure will be talked about in local circles for decades to come. Brutus effectively held the entire wedding party hostage as the sun began to set. He wasn't threatening anyone directly, just strategically positioning himself so that nobody could reach the exit road without coming uncomfortably close to his massive horns. Some of the more inebriated groomsmen initially thought they could scare him away with loud noises and arm waving. Brutus responded by charging a nearby table, flipping it 15 feet into the air with one toss of his head. That ended those attempts pretty quickly. Others tried to form a plan to create a distraction while the rest of the party escaped. But Brahma bulls have excellent peripheral vision and remarkable speed for their size. Every time a group thought they were being sneaky, Brutus would swivel those enormous horns in their direction, and they'd freeze like schoolchildren in a game of red light, green light. The bride's father, a banker from Houston based on his conversation, approached me with what he thought was a reasonable offer. "Name your price," he said, still managing to sound condescending despite his predicament. "Whatever it takes to get that animal restrained so we can leave. It's getting dark and there are elderly people and children here." I nodded sympathetically. "I understand your concern, sir. But Brutus isn't a car you can just turn off. He's a living creature on his own property, upset because strangers invaded his space. The safest approach is to wait until he calms down naturally." "This is kidnapping," Deborah shouted from nearby. "No ma'am, this is trespassing," I countered, with a side of criminal mischief for opening my livestock gate. "But I'm willing to forget about pressing charges under one condition." That got everyone's attention. Even Brutus seemed to pause his cake licking to listen. "What condition?" the bride's father asked warily. I smiled. "Ms. Hartman resigns as HOA president, effective immediately. And the HOA provides written acknowledgement that my ranch is exempt from all their regulations and complaints, in perpetuity." The wedding guests turned to look at Deborah, whose face had gone pale. "That's absurd," she stammered. "You can't hold us here to force my resignation." "I'm not holding anyone," I said innocently, gesturing to Brutus. "He is. And I'm just suggesting a solution that would motivate me to try extra hard to move him." One of the bridesmaids stepped forward. "For God's sake, Deborah, just resign. My grandmother needs her medication and it's in the car." The bride, mascara streaming down her face, joined in. "Mrs. Hartman, please. This day is already ruined. Just do what he asks." More voices joined the chorus, and I could see Deborah realizing she was losing her audience. The sun was setting, mosquitoes were coming out, and people were getting desperate. Finally, the bride's father took charge. Deborah will resign. I'm on the HOA board too, and I'll ensure the exemption is drafted and signed by all board members. Just get us out of here. I looked at Deborah, who gave a stiff nod, her lips pressed into a thin line of defeat. I'll get it in writing right now, I said, pulling out my phone and opening my email app. Draft the resignation and exemption, send it to my email, and once it's received, I'll move Brutus. 20 minutes and several heated exchanges later, I received 2 emails, one with Deborah's resignation letter to the HOA board, and another with a hastily drafted but legally binding document exempting my ranch from all current and future HOA regulations, signed digitally by 3 board members who were present at the wedding. Only then did I walk over to Brutus, pulling an apple from my pocket. I spoke softly to him, scratched behind his ears just the way he liked, and gently led him away from the exit road. He followed me like an oversized puppy, completely docile now that he was with someone he trusted. The wedding guests practically sprinted to their vehicles, not even bothering to collect the remaining decorations or gifts. Deborah shot me a look of pure hatred as she climbed into her Range Rover, but I just tipped my hat in response. Pleasure hosting your event, Ms. Hartman. Do come again sometime. Word travels fast in small communities. By Monday morning, everyone in the county had heard some version of how my bull had held an entire wedding hostage after the HOA tried to take over my land. Most versions were exaggerated. Some claimed Brutus had eaten the wedding cake while wearing the bride's veil, but the core truth remained. The local paper ran a surprisingly balanced story with the headline, "Wedding Gone Wild, Local Ranch Bull Objects to Ceremony." They interviewed several guests who admitted that some groomsmen had entered a clearly marked bull pasture without permission, as a prank. Even the sheriff, an old fishing buddy of mine, found the whole situation more amusing than criminal. "Seems to me the bull was just protecting his territory," he told the reporter. "Can't arrest a bull for being a bull." Deborah Hartman didn't just resign from the HOA. She put her house on the market a week later. Apparently, facing your neighbors after being outwitted by a rancher and his bull was too much for her social standing. The for sale sign in her yard felt like a victory flag every time I drove past. The HOA kept their word about the exemption. For the first time in 5 years, I received no complaint letters about my rooster, my tractor, or my fence line. The new president, ironically the bride's father who had negotiated the deal, even stopped by to introduce himself properly. "No hard feelings," he said, extending his hand. "That was actually some shrewd negotiating back there." "None at all," I replied, shaking his hand. "How's the newlywed couple doing?" He chuckled. "They're in Hawaii trying to forget their wedding day. But between you and me, they've already got a great story to tell their grandkids someday." As for Brutus, he became something of a local celebrity. People would drive slowly past my fence line hoping to catch a glimpse of the wedding crasher bull. I even had requests from other ranchers wanting to use him for breeding, his new reputation apparently making him more valuable. I had a custom sign made and posted it at the entrance to my property, right where my land meets the Oakwood Estates development. It features a silhouette of a bull and reads, "Trespassers will be moved." Underneath in smaller letters, "Wedding planners will be charged double." Every morning when I let Brutus out to pasture, I give him an extra apple. Not many bulls can say they've chased off an entire HOA with just their presence. He's earned his reputation as the best security system a ranch could have. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun sets over my bluebonnet field, I sit on my porch with a cold drink and smile at the thought of 50 people in formal were being held hostage by my bull. There's a certain poetic justice there that no court ruling could ever match. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't something you plan. It's something that just naturally unfolds when people who don't respect boundaries finally meet something bigger and more stubborn than they are. In this case, 2,100 pounds of snorting, cake-eating justice named Brutus. Just remember, folks, always close the gate behind you. You never know what might be waiting on the other side.